Hey, Nissim, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
I'm thrilled to have you on. I know that you had a very, very long day and lots of interviews. It is a great privilege to have you on.
But nothing's as important as being here with you right now, so it doesn't matter.
No, not with me. I'm not so important, but just spreading it to the listeners.
Right, that's right.
Okay, so I just wanted to say, for all the listeners, if you have not heard Nissim's story, you have such an incredible story, and it's out there, it's online. So we're not going to get too much into your story, but just for the listeners to be aware, Nissim, you grew up in Seattle. Your home full of drugs and crime passing through, different things, and you pulled yourself out of that. And it seems like all of the difficulties from your past inspired you to take on this new direction. But where I want to start and maybe jump into one window into your story. So we've had one in-person encounter before. It wasn't like direct, but I was a guest. I was visiting Israel, and I was sitting in the back of an Eish Torah little study room library in the back of Eish Torah. And I see people, it was empty at the time, it was at night, people are coming in. I said, what's going on? They said, oh, Nissim Black is going to speak to us. You remember? Do you remember doing this one?
Yeah, I've been to Asia a few times.
So been there a few times. Okay.
But yeah.
That's okay, so I'm sitting in the back, and
one of my spots.
It packs in, and you came in. I think you were late to that, by the way. No, I'm not bringing it up. Don't worry. So you came into the front, and you gave. So I knew you as a musician, I knew you as a rapper, but then I heard you speak, and wow! I mean, the students were so inspired. And if I remember correctly, and I hope I don't mess this up, but you spoke about how you wanted to live a life of holiness and purity. And you spoke about how on one occasion, I don't remember exactly where it was in your journey, but you sat and you prayed to God, you davened to Hashem for hours straight, that Hashem should give you holiness and purity. And I think also just specifically because of the time of year that we're in, we're about to enter into a time period called Shovavim, a time where we're supposed to work on holiness and purity. Can you bring us back to that stage in your life, if you remember, what I'm talking about, that stage in life, and just tell us about sort of that stage in your journey?
Well, it'd be very hard to progress if that isn't a constant stage. If you're not constantly crying out for these things. But no doubt about it. And now that you mentioned that, I think it was specifically the beginning of the Shovavim when I actually gave this lecture, because
I think so too.
That's usually when I go into Aish around Shovavim period. So
okay, so perfect.
Now that makes a lot of sense. Look at this; it's like a reunion.
Yeah.
So for me, there was a lot of factors in this, because you grow up, as you mentioned, in a world full of drugs and violence and abuse, and you grow up not necessarily knowing that there's anything outside of that world, adultery, rampant, the whole everything. And and I don't know how I got spared. I should have been way worse off than what I was. I do know how. God kept me the whole entire time, somehow, some way, even through all my own ups and downs. When I look back and I said, wow, it could have got really bad, and it didn't really get that bad. But however, as you're growing, and the more and more you learn, and I always say, they say by a lot of funerals, unfortunately, even if the guy was like, nobody liked him, right? They always say to know him was to love him, know him was to love him. And the more and more I came to know God, the more and more I came into knowing Hashem, the more and more I loved him, and I craved to be closer to him. I just craved to be with him even more. So if everything I read, and if everything I'm seeing, especially I spent a lot of time in the Hebrew scriptures and Tanakh, and it talking about how much God demanded from us holiness. He wanted purity. And I went through a period in my life where I was looking for anything I felt that was holding me back from that connection. Like, what's in my life that I feel like is competing with my love of God? Like, what is it? You know what I mean? When it was video games, I was sitting with my brother-in-law. We spent a lot of time playing video games, by the way. We had calculated all the time that we were playing, and it wasn't like I shouldn't say I love video games. That's not honest. I enjoyed playing NFL Madden is what I enjoyed playing. I didn't play any other games. I didn't care for any other games of Madden. I was like I was stuck on this game.
I was an NBA Live guy myself.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you're a live guy. Nice. So I obsessed with playing this game, and we played, I mean, for hours on it. We're wasting days, and literally we calculated all the time. For the games, you got 5 minute quarters, many breaks, calculate, maybe I went to the store, grabbed some wings and a beer in the middle of the whole thing, the whole whatever. And came back to it and said, we looked at all the time, we took out calculators, is that we spent 10 days of our life playing video games.
Right.
That's a lot. That's a lot of time. Like some people, oh, it's not so bad. And I know there's real gamers who got me beat by a long shot. But as a person who wanted and felt that God should be the most important thing in my life, I couldn't live. I couldn't deal. Everything that got my way. So first thing, we sold the Xbox. Then I sold my TV. Then I left music, rap. My love was music. People think like, I've been rapping the whole time. I thought I retired. But anything that I felt was getting in the way of that connection to God that I wanted, I went on a spree of removing it out of my life. And obviously some things came back, but it's one thing to, when you clean up a mess, you first should take out everything, get everything out, and then you start putting things back where they go. But if you never take them out and you just move stuff around, there'll be crumbs underneath. There'll be all different type of things under that you didn't know, and those car keys you were looking for, and you got them made over 7, 8 times. It was really underneath the dresser the whole time because you didn't move anything out. So for me, I had to move everything out in order to make the room, more mesudar, more in order, as we should say. And so that was really the beginning of a journey that I would say that, I've been on my whole entire life. I think we always have to go back to the drawing board to be able to say, is there anything in my life that's competing with God, with my love for God?
Yeah, that was powerful. I remember right after that talk, literally one of the guys went up and handed you his phone. He literally put it in your hand. He's like, "Take this away from me." I just want to. It was a crazy moment.
Right, that was a very powerful moment. Very powerful.
You
Very
know,
powerful.
it's interesting to me. I don't know that. I hope that this is not, a secret. And I think that you're aware that a lot of the videos of the old, before it was Nissim Black, Damien Black, your
Mhm,
early career before the conversion. I don't know a
mhm,
lot, but
mhm.
there's, some of them are still online and they're still available. I don't
Right.
know, how you feel about that. And,
I tried to get them taken down, but it's like more bureaucracy than trying to
right.
get a
And I don't
passport
think
in the
there's a
door.
lot out there. I don't think there's a lot out there.
Right.
And again, who knows? Maybe that's what God wants. Maybe
Yeah,
God wants people
exactly.
to see the
Exactly.
and if you watch them, it comes across as, the typical, like, some of the gangster rap that I, grew up with, where,
Mhm.
I wouldn't let my parents know that I was watching it. But it's interesting because as I've heard your story, I know now, I watch it knowing that already at that point in your life, I
Mhm.
believe that you were already on a spiritual journey.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and it's incredible to me because if you watch it, you wouldn't know this. And it makes me wonder, like, sometimes we're watching someone's persona, we're watching, the image that they're putting forth, and it can be totally different to
Right.
what's going on in their mind and in their heart.
Right, right. Yeah, it's very interesting because a lot of those, one specifically, I'm not gonna name the song because I don't want Google going crazy after this, but
That's why I
you
didn't say it also, because I didn't know what you wanted me
it's
to
a
say or
specific
not.
song. There were times, that whole entire by the time that I was already shooting videos or whatever, I was already at a conflict. There were other times I was doing gangster rap and it was very very probably appropriate, I would say more because that's where I was at in my life. But those are very young years. By the time I was 19, 8, 20, I was, confronted by record label to go on and make, music for them. But what they wanted was gangster music. But I was already on a spiritual journey. In the beginning of that was actually Christianity on my way into Judaism later on. But I was I found myself very confused. I was trying to portray something in order to pretend to be something that I was very familiar with. It wasn't like I had to, go to acting school to do this. This was my life. It was still going on, in various aspects of my life, with family members and so on. But I was trying to portray something that I wasn't, and I was in such a deep battle inside of my heart, trying to figure out who I was. I was very confused about who I was. So, it would stand the reason other people would also be confused, and I encountered that as I would sit with people and I would do interviews. I remember during that time, and they would go, "Wow, you're actually really a nice guy." And I'm thinking, like, well, what am I supposed to be? Like, what I'm saying?
Right,
Well, I'm supposed to
right.
be some jerk. And you get that, I think it happens more than with just me, but people sometimes, you're trying to find yourself, and you're trying to be yourself, and then you're derailed by what everybody else defines as success. This is the way to real success. This is the way to how you really make it big. And in that, you'll run towards that, but then you'll be leaving yourself in the dust. And it's only so long, I think, before a person breaks one way or another, because as long as you're not your true honest self, then it's going to be very, very hard for you to continue putting on an act.
Yeah, you in lots of your songs, and you've used the Hebrew term, Aramaic term, alma de shikra, right?
Alma de Shikra.
A world of
Yeah,
falsehood.
right.
And it makes me think, because you see it other times, you'll see someone, do a movie scene or shoot a music video or pose in a certain way, and then 5 years later there's an article that's written that says, oh, I actually didn't want to do that, or I didn't like the way it came across or portrayed me in a certain light. And it's interesting that we never know, you never
Right,
know
right.
what's going on with the
Absolutely.
gap between what a person is putting out into the world and where they really are.
Right, right. And this is why, um, as I mentioned it before, a lot of it was me begging God and asking, we don't understand how important this relationship is for us to, not only for ourselves, but also for our relationship between us and God, because every person, you need the me filters, right? Like, I need a me filter. Like, I need to really be able to evaluate of whether or not I'm going to do whatever it is that I'm going to do. That, is it me? Is this really me? Is this really who I am? And it's very, very hard for a person to know that, because, like, as we say, almost the shukra, a false world, everything's so loud. It's so loud. And it says, I think in the first or second book, I think it's the first book of Kings. It could have been the second book of Kings. I'm sorry. Where it says the story of Elijah the prophet, as he's going off on his journey, and he's, obviously very upset. He was chased, and he was going to be killed by, even by, I think, the upper tribes at that time. And he's lamenting to God, and God takes him on this journey, and he shows him an earthquake. He says, is the voice of God, is God over here? It's like, no, God's not here. Is he in the wind, the loud, the pushing wind? No. He says God is a very small, still voice. So when the rest of the world is loud, how are we going to find God unless we go and silence it? We need to get away from the rest of the world. We need to go and find ourselves, spend time with God, a considerable amount of time, to try to figure out who we are and what it is that God wants from us in this world. It's very hard when you're listening to the loud world.
Yeah. So that being said, so just to jump in, we're everyone in the Buxbaum house. We're all big fans of Nissim Black music. We love it. We love your stuff.
Mhm,
My family is very excited that we have you on the podcast,
mhm,
and you have a wide variety, a wide range of music, and definitely some of your music, some of your tracks. I mean, they're really like they're trending beats. It's a very up to date sound, and even within the world of hip hop, it's a constantly evolving genre, and you seem to, I mean, everything that you're putting out is right there. We make a joke because there's a lot now in, like, Jewish rap music. There's a lot
right.
now, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, the role that you played in sort of the evolution of Jewish music, and there's a lot. And so my I'm embarrassed to say the story, but my 2-year-old the other day, he got a hold of Spotify, and he's going wherever he wants with it. He's
Hmm.
listening to whatever. And there was this rap song playing, and it was going for like a couple of minutes straight. And we didn't know what it was. We thought it was, he got it from one of my daughter's, Jewish music tracks. And it was like 2 or 3 minutes when we realized, I don't think that this is, we started to hear like swear music. We don't think this is Nissim Black or anything like that. But again, my point is like it took 2 or 3 minutes to do. So my question is like, here you're obviously on top of it. You're on top of the music and the sound.
Hmm.
So what do you say, how do you balance those two worlds? How are you able to stay so trending and on top of that, but yet here you are, and you clearly come across, every time I've seen you, and your persona, you really you emanate a very holiness and purity, and people could tell you're a man of God, you're a Ben Torah, you're a spiritual person, but yet you really have legs in these two worlds.
It's very interesting because um, it's very nice of you to say. I always feel like I'm way out. These kids, the young kids, I look at them and like, man, they're so on the ball, and I'm like feeling like I'm some grandpa, really. I'm being honest. But the truth is, this phenomenon is very interesting because I stopped listening, honestly, I stopped listening to secular music maybe 11, 12 years ago. I don't listen to secular music. I have a pulse on what's going on because I'm involved with so many kids. Like,
Mhm.
there's a rapper NF who's out, who's actually very positive in terms of, I wouldn't say positive 100%, but I would definitely say he doesn't swear. He's
Yeah,
definitely, more on
a
the
lot of
positive
mental
side.
health, a lot of
A lot of mental health
messages on
things that
mental
he
health.
that he's
Yeah,
yeah, exactly, that he's ciphering and venting about. That I was introduced to him by, the young kids that I'm encountering.
sure.
So a lot of that is are things that are brought to me, or there's contemporary I would say Christian rappers who don't swear, have a positive message, like Lecrae, Derek Minor, other people like that, who somehow, some way have made contact with me. Actually, part of the company that distributes my music is one of these companies that also is owned by Derek Minor, who happens to be a Christian rapper, who's more, and these guys are much more on the pulse than me. So I don't always know exactly what's going on, but I think, another thing is I've always been very surprised because at one point I said, I'm not following, I can't keep up with what's going on out there. I have no idea. And somehow, not only you yourself, but other people told me like, man, you're right on the mark. I have no idea how it keeps happening. I'm being honest with you. I
Right.
have no idea how it keeps happening. I hear things like everybody else does in the gas station, or in a some Israeli gas station where they don't realize that the person's swearing every other word. Or even if they do, they don't really know like the bad words. Like over here.
Right.
So I hear music as I'm picking it up as I go, and then my brother-in-law or one of the other producers that I'm working with, they make a track. It just sort of like that's what pulls me in. I haven't been producing as much myself, so it'd be different if I was making the music. But once I hear a track, if it has that spark, it starts to open up the
Right.
world of creativity.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Fascinating. So okay, so let's take it back a little bit to your early career. It's a little because I'd love to just discuss a little bit your, evolution as a rapper, as a Jew, as a Black Jewish rapper, all of that. By the way, I just want to make sure I
Mm.
don't hold you over time. What
No,
is your schedule like?
you're my last interview of the day.
Oh, so we're going all night. No, I'm joking. All right.
I know it looks like my daughter got somewhere to be, but we'll see.
Okay,
Go
fine.
ahead.
So yeah, so you'll tell me if if it's too much time.
Okay.
But so like looking back, so first of all, it's a little bit hard just looking back to track like where you began, because I know you have
Hmm.
this album out, Aliyah.
Hmm.
Where were you in the journey when that came out?
So Aliyah was, wow, that was an awesome moment because Aliyah was the beginning of, I named it Aliyah because I was on a spiritual ascent. I was having an Aliyah. Um, I was I was out of my breaking point of coming from, I wouldn't say Stam Christianity, coming from Messianic Judaism into Orthodox Judaism, and I had just realized that rap and Judaism and all these other, they don't really mix. That was my understanding of it then, and I this was my retirement album actually. So I was actually bowing out of the rap game with this album, so I thought, and that was known even from its inception with the team that I was a part of at the time. And so I didn't I didn't really know really where I was going, but I was still like, by the time I finished the album, I was like still holding on to a Christian belief. By the time it came out, I was like already like starting the Gayers.
Wow.
So so it was like an interesting
That's
place,
fantastic.
so
Yeah.
as I was shifting. And I remember before actually releasing the album, I only did it on the grounds that I would finish this last album, be my last album. I wouldn't be forced to make any more music. They keep all the money, gave all the money to the company, to the record label. And I myself would take nothing, but the only thing that they had to give me was that they didn't have me perform on Shabbat and on the Yamim Tovim. And I worked a regular job. I worked really as a facility coordinator, and then I ended up getting four raises for a property management company. And I ended up getting four raises, and I ended up becoming a leasing agent for a company, and later on moving up even more in property management with this company. And so for me, that that was like in 1 year, like four raises. You know what I'm saying? And I didn't take anything from the other job. And I went and I toured and I did my thing. And on Shabbat, I went to a Chabad or whatever. So it was a very, very magical time for me because it was in between. Like I think like the first show I did, and I think I talked about this with Rabbi Y. Jacobson. Like it was really borderline because I didn't know anything about really like the laws of Shabbat or anything like that. So like I was like just like making kiddush of it, and I sit down like listen to a shir from Rabbi YY on Saturday morning. You know what I'm saying? Like that was my geschmack.
It's a
I
beautiful way
was
to
like,
start. Yeah.
it was just what it was. So it was a very beautiful, magical time for me, my wife, my brother-in-law, and sister-in-law who also came on this journey with us.
Yeah. I know that in 2013, I think that to me at least, following music, I think it seems that that's when you sort of reemerged. You
Right.
had a poetry slam, something on H.com was called The Black Miracle, something
Yeah.
for Hanukkah.
Yeah. The Black Man. That was my first Hanukkah song, I should say.
Yeah.
Which wasn't really a song. Like it was a poetry slam. There was an article that was published about me on H.com.
Yeah.
And the article went very viral, and they let me know there was like this thing is getting like a lot of clicks, like so obviously them being involved in Key Roof and seeing that they had such a big splash, they said, listen, we should do some more stuff. So they brought me in to be keynote speaker. I think it was the first time I spoke ever in my life was for Aish. And like it was like I can't remember who the other speaker was, but I know for sure the other speaker was one of the other speakers was Charlie Harari. Like, I
Okay.
mean, come on, it's like me,
It's
and
nice
I'm
to
a
share a
keynote
stage
speaker, and
with,
I'm
right?
I'm going after Charlie.
Yeah.
Like you can't even understand. It's such siyata dishmai that whatever I said out of my mouth, everybody like was on the floor laughing. So I don't remember too much of what
You
happened,
just
but
got to make them laugh. That's the
it was
most.
amazing.
Yeah.
And right around the same time, right before that, we ended up doing the poetry slam, which worked
Right.
out because Thanksgiving and Hanukkah, I think, were lining up for one of the very small amount of times that actually happens. But and
Thanksgiving,
so we
right?
ended up Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
and so we ended up doing it. And they wanted to do a more poetry style because they wanted to be able to get the story out there. So
Right.
and it was awesome. It was really
And I
awesome.
think also, I mean, listen, I've been following like Jewish rap since I'm a kid. Okay.
Ah,
Nissim, do you know?
you
Okay,
like the
Nissim,
Black
what do you
Attitude
think?
era and
Before that, before Black
okay.
Attitude,
Oh.
first one,
Don't say Beastie Boys.
no.
Okay.
First
Okay.
black rap, no, so first, not before Black Attitude, first Jewish rap
Mhm.
was Schlock Rock.
Oh, Lenny Solomon?
Was Lenny
You do call
Salmon
that
together with
rap?
Eitan G.
Wait, Eitan. Okay, now you're throwing the Eitan. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, that was
You're
the
right.
first. Then it
Making a
evolved to
motzi,
Black
making a
Attitude.
motzi,
Yeah,
making a
exactly.
motzi, making a
Yo yo
yeah,
yo
yeah.
Yamaka, right? That was, and then okay, so then came along Black Hat, and Black Hat, they were like a bunch of yeshiva guys, you
hmm
know, and they
hmm
sort of
hmm
pushed the boundary. But again, nothing stuck, nothing became
Right,
mainstream, right?
right, right.
Matisyo comes along, and now suddenly people are like awake, right? They're
hmm
looking at what's going on. they bring him to like the Haas concert, A Time for Music. Nobody knows
Mhm.
what to do. Like people are like, they're leaving, they're closing their ears, they're fasting for the next 3 days. You said,
Wow.
this is the world that I grew up in. Like you couldn't just
Right.
listen to any music you wanted. Like you get,
Right.
if it
Right.
wasn't in the box you were given.
Right.
So when you came along, I didn't think that you were going to last because you
Mhm.
were not. I mean, you weren't even the first. I don't know if the
Right.
listeners know this. You weren't the first Jewish black rapper.
Right. Right. You're right. You're right.
There
You're
was
absolutely right.
Why Love,
Why Love was there before me for sure. No doubt about
but
it.
nobody was able to break through. And
You're
then
right. You're right.
suddenly,
Shine
Nissim
even was
Shine,
yep,
right?
yep.
Shine. And suddenly Nissim Black is everywhere. You were like, you were on everybody's album. You could be in like in the middle of a Hasidish, album, and then suddenly in the middle of the song, like, Nissim Black is
Imagine
coming
when I
in.
felt like walking down the streets of like Mayor Sharon and like hearing A Million Years playing okay, it's one thing. Okay, there's a few different people the different people own shops in Mayor Sharon, but to see Chalmi
Yeah.
Hasidic guys with the golden blue stripes listening to my music, it was like crazy. Like
It
I
was
could,
incredible. And
yeah,
I'm like waiting, like, when is the pushback? When is it going to happen? When are people going to start saying,
right,
no, you can't? And like, if I just watched you more and more just become part
wow,
of the mainstream. And it
wow.
totally, so tell me about that. Tell me about that journey. Was there any time that you thought you wouldn't be accepted? People were giving you problems. I want to hear how that felt to sort of break through into the mainstream.
It's a very good question. The honest truth is that I was being told that like from the beginning, like everybody that knew, like the moment I decided to like come back to, wasn't really a decision for myself. I felt very spiritually led. I've talked about the story before. I had a son who was sick. Now, I should even before I start that preface by saying what was going on in my life as I was, finishing, coming to the finishing of my conversion. And I had not only my wife, but people, there were rabbis in the community, very close family friends. And it was like this season, like, 2013, where everybody's like, you got to go back to music. Like you need to be making, this is the time. And I'm looking like this can't be the time. There's a lot of other people that you have mentioned that are having their differences now with Judaism, and I attribute it to their success in their careers.
Sure.
That there's no way in the world that I'm going out now. You're saying to go like, look at this, and I know each person had their things, and I'm boys with Matis, and we talked and whatever, but there's there was like no way I can go back to this now, and I felt like everybody around me who were close to me that like really like had my back, you know what I'm saying, like even in a spiritual sense were pushing me, so that confused me even more. It's like, no, you got to have my back. Like how could you be pushing me to go back to this? And just because that was my interpretation of what hip hop and what that world was. So my son gets sick with meningitis. He goes to the hospital he's in there for 2 weeks. We didn't have no idea what was going on. And my wife like made them do a spinal tap or something like that, and they found out. And I remember coming home and like as proud as we were to find out that finally we had a diagnosis after days of going to the hospital trying to figure out why this 4-month-old baby's fever is not coming down, and we had no idea. So we find out what it is. I'm a big fan at this point in my life of the books of Rabbi Shalom Arush, who's a rabbi, Breslov rabbi in Jerusalem, who many times in a lot of his books that say when you're in a state of emergency, you really need a lot of help, you should spend 6 hours talking to God, crying out from your heart as much as you can. And there's many different reasons why. I'm not going to go into all the reasons why specifically 6 hours. So obviously my kid's life is on the line. This is the time to
Right.
do it. If I ever had a time to do it, I never had time. Now I have time. And I was praying, and near the end, I had all these things coming into my head, and my biggest thing was God. Like there has to be something. I'm struggling right now. I'm about to go through my Gairus and I'm my conversion, and I have the world just seemed like it was upside down at that point, and I'm trying to figure out what's wrong. What am I not doing? What am I supposed to be doing? I'm not doing. Like what am I doing? Like I'm sacrificing my life. I'm giving up everything for God. Like what am I not doing? And just as I'm sitting there, I start to hear everybody's voice saying, Nissan, you got to do, you got, and I'm going, no way. I'm already, it's like I was talking to myself, like, no way, I can't. And and I had a thought there, probably because of Hannah and her prayers. But I had a thought that I would test God. I said I had a Rode NT2. It was a microphone that was, not working, was completely out, wasn't working anymore for years. But I held on to it. It was dusting, catching dust in one of my cabinets over there. And I said to God, I said that if this microphone works, then I'm going to take it as a sign that this is coming from you. So after I was done, I went and plugged it up, and the microphone worked. It worked. And my brother-in-law was, very familiar. He does music with me, so he knew that the microphone wasn't working. So
Wow.
then after that, I
Wow.
go to my rabbi, and I say to him, I said, Rabbi Shmuel Brody. Now, Rabbi Shmuel Brody, who's now in Baltimore, he's like one of the biggest secrets in Baltimore, by the way. He is just, I mean, if there's been any person single-handedly that gave over to me such a fire of love for Hashem and closeness and I would say avoda, true service, was Rabbi Brody. I
Ooh, we
just
got to get him on
it
the
was
podcast.
yeah, you got to get Rabbi Brody.
Listeners, you heard it here first. Over Shmuel Brody, the secret of Baltimore.
He is wonderful. And so I remember going to him, and I had mentioned to him before that I was having, some pushing in that direction from people. And I even mentioned to him I was very scared about it. I wasn't so sure. He said, let's take our time, let's think about it. But after this happened, it was almost like, and he believed me for sure. Um, he gave me a 2-hour lecture. I will never forget it. And it was very strong, very harif because I needed it. And then he gave me a bracha. And after I spoke with him, I'd also sent the idea to I think also Laser Brody, who I was in connection with at that time, and he also too was very, you got to do this. You got to do this. I had no idea what I was doing, and I tiptoed. I'm telling you, and I literally tiptoed the whole entire time. It would seem like I was confident, but I was doubting myself the whole entire time. I was so doubting myself, and it wasn't until a couple years later where Aish happens. Aish was a big part in this because that article went viral. There was another individual who was also had a trending article at the time on Aish named Elon Cohen. He had a crazy story of him finding Lady Gaga when he was working for a record label, and he went on a birthright trip, fell in love, and went back and threw everything away. And she like takes off that next year, and he's like in yeshiva. So very very interesting story himself, and who also still had a love for music and record producing. And he brought up the idea of doing this Hashem Melech remix. He was in contact with God at the time, and he said, "Let's do this." And God was very interested in doing it, and we did this song. And like for the first time for me, I felt freedom. I was like,
Wow.
"Wow!" Now I feel like I'm doing my purpose. And we flew to New York. I went and we shot the video, and nothing ever felt so much more real. But I really sacrificed everything in terms of like, I had a job. I was working for the Kollel there in Seattle. But I stopped everything and I said, this is what I have to do. I threw everything on. I said, God, okay, now I'm listening, And I have no idea, as you're saying this to me, I'm thinking about this, and I've been told this not by just you. I don't think it's been said as beautiful as you, but I've been told this by many different people. Like, Nissan, how did this happen? I have no idea. Like,
Yeah.
out of all the people, everybody you name, let's call a spade too, right? A spade meaning that why would it have not felt more comfortable for it to happen by Eitan G or for Black Attitude? Or like, let's just talk the color already. I can
Mhm.
understand that culturally, the yeshiva bachim who were probably listening too much Dr. Dre or something back
Yeah.
in the day. But and then like but at least because most people are comfortable. Eminem blew up. Not only was he gifted, he was so talented, so great, but also too. White people was like, I can identify with him. He's like, he's one of ours, right?
Right.
So for me to come from maybe where I came from or whatever, I think the only thing I could probably think of is maybe it felt a little bit more, and this is no hit on anybody else, maybe it felt a little bit more authentic because my whole world was rap. It wasn't like I just picked it up. My mother was a rapper, my
Mhm.
father was a rapper, so this is part of my yichus. This is my
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
my heritage almost to some degree. But I have no idea. I always say that it was just siyata dishmai, that it was a time when God said go, and I happened to be the guy that was sitting around, and God said, okay, let's do it.
Beautiful.
That's the only thing I could think of.
Beautiful. So then comes along. It seems like your first big one that was not part of a collaboration was A Million Years.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that, yeah, and over there, I just remember watching that video for the first time. It was such a moving video. It was simple. It was you holding the Sefer Torah, walking, and it was very, very powerful. And you had the sound, and I think that's really, I think it was that album that really, made you
Right.
blow up.
Right. And you know what's funny about that is that that was a song also too that and sometimes you can pick them, you can't pick them. I was like, this is not a single, but I did the song with Yisrael, and I was there with him and his chavrusa, Binyamin Kushner, who's a big Talmud Chacham who's there. He spent a lot of time by Rav Yashiv or whatever, but he learned. He's a very smart and learned person, and he was there in the studio, and we're trying to pick out a big thing. Now, if I had my choice, I would have went like Ohave Hashem or something more upbeat. Like let's
Right.
make a single from this, and I just did like a poll, and they were like the main two. They're like a million years is it? I mean, obviously Yisrael, right? Okay, because he's on the song. But but when they said that, I was like, no, are you serious? Okay, make a single. So I'm thinking in my head, how am I going to be able to get this to people to where they're going to be able to understand what it was? I don't know how we came up with the idea of doing the Torah scroll or whatever, but I remember God saying like, you can't put this out as a single. No way. They're gonna think you're talking about a girl. They're gonna think, like I remember God, like, it was
Yeah.
like, you can't do this, whatever. And I remember when we were sitting back and we were all watching the video, and he goes, this was genius, Nissim. This is genius. And you have to realize, I'm like, I know nothing about the politics. I don't know what I should be facing. I know have no idea about the backlash or whatever. I'm just like trying to figure out why everybody's tripping out about everything,
Yeah.
right? And then it goes, and more people watching, and more people stopping me in the street, and I just can't. I'm just pouring my heart out to Hashem. That's
Yeah.
it. I'm pouring out my heart to God in music, and it's people are taking to it, and I get stopped by bubbies even. It's
It was
always
amazing.
mind blowing who stops me.
Okay, so not to make you uncomfortable, but then
Hmm.
comes 2020.
Yes.
And I thought like I'd gotten comfortable with this idea of Nissim Black, like rap is now mainstream.
Yeah.
And then comes the singles of 2020. And it's like Motherland Bounce and Rerun and the
Hmm.
Best Friend music video. And I'm like, what is this guy doing? Like, what is happening now? What is happening? And I'm like, he's gonna just blow everything for himself. So can you tell me? And I want to, just before I give this back to you, I just want to read. This is your comment on the Motherland Bounce YouTube video.
Hmm.
You wrote, thank you to everyone who liked this video and dropped some love here in the comments. Really means a lot to me. Although I was very comfortable from a creative standpoint making this was a big leap for me and it took a lot of guts. So those that have a deep ear will hear what's being manifested behind these lyrics. Those who don't, enjoy it on whatever level you can.
Hmm.
So yeah, so can you tell me like what it seemed like there was some sort of change in the Nissan Black brand when it came to those songs? What happened there? What was that about?
Thank you so much for allowing me to talk about this publicly. Thank you. Um, Eh, oh boy, have I been waiting, and I probably need to elaborate even more. But the truth is that this came at a very, very hard takufa for me. That I was going very hard season in life. My kids were being rejected from schools left and right, and I'm here in Israel. So unfortunately, or fortunately, things are not politically correct. We don't do customer service very well here, also in Israel. So nobody was hiding the reason for why they weren't allowing my kids into school, which was obviously because of the color of their skin. And in the defense, I would say it wasn't because of they thought because maybe they could have thought because they were better than us, but it was more so coming from a place of where we don't know how to deal with this. How do we deal with teaching Ahavas Israel on to them what seemed on such an extreme level? How do you go through Meir Sharim, and this has happened not only for me, my wife. I have a group of 80 guys who are most of them are black or either from Latin America, and they're all from religious guys, Jewish. And many of us have books where we open it up, and when we have example book and it goes goy, it's always a black family, right? So there's a
Hmm.
certain indoctrination that's been happening in our world, and for some of it maybe for a push out reason to reject certain things, but then it can be hurtful in other ways. So for my kids, it was very, very hard for me. I was living in Meisharim at the time, and at the time there was also a lot of push from people who were in my life at that time, or close people, to do more outreach towards the black community. Um, in and being pushed in a way where it's like your voice could be that voice to do it. You can do it, and you're already very familiar. You have the culture. You already know the everything. And I think a lot of the pain that was coming from was at that moment was the first time I was actually experiencing resistance, also face to face, at least for my music, million years, Hashem Alech or whatever. There were certain, individuals and kahilas or whatever that felt a certain way. And I was for the first time receiving that backlash at the same time that my kids were not getting into school. At the same time, I'm flying to New York, and I have Hebrew Israelites or black people telling me I'm not black anymore because I became white. And so it was a very, very hard and trying time for me. And so what happened was, as creating the song Motherland Bounce, and I signed with a record label, I should say, which was a secular record label that was underneath the Orchard Sony branch, where Sony was actually supposed to be doing all the promotion and marketing for this album. So I have all these cards on the table, and the closest people at that time to me are they didn't mean to, they wasn't trying to hurt me, right? But one of the most dangerous parts about being in the position of I don't know, musician, celebrity, or well-known artist is that everybody always has ideas for you, and everybody always has the best version of you for you, right? Everybody's always presenting something to you. Everybody's pitching you something all the time, right? And and like I said, I don't think it was on purpose. Nothing was intentional. I think at a very hurt and very vulnerable time in my life, um, that I really I ended up not only doing the song. So I had the song in my head for a long time, just the first few lyrics, right? Black and Yiddish, I've been with it, Sammy Davis cousin. But that was it. Like I played with that for a long time, and I didn't finish the song. And a certain friend who pushed me was like, "You got to finish this song, man. You got to do the song. You got to do the song." And I had no hashik, no desire to finish the song. It was just funny to me in my head. Like, I was like, "Oh, I'll play with it." So I ended up doing the song Motherland Bounce. And I'm in the studio, and I didn't even listen to it back. I was like, okay, next, let's get to the next song, right? And I started working on more music. And most of the project that Motherland Bounce came along with was very melodic. And in some of the songs, you're right, I just started releasing as singles after I broke out of the deal, because I already had this backlash of I had this catalog, so much music that was built up from that was supposed to go out with this record label, that I just started releasing songs and shooting videos. But that time for me was hard. It was very, very hard for me, because I tried to rally and get behind something that I didn't really feel 100% about. 100%, I felt very happy about being black. 100%, I felt very happy about being Jewish. But the song wasn't my song. The record label picked this as the single.
Right.
So when they decided to put it out as a single, I was, it was like everybody was telling me, like, no, this is the song, this is the song. And all actuality, the whole time my wife was like, I hate it. I hate it. My wife was like, if I would only listen to my wife. And it's not like anything bad. What was very interesting is that now reflecting and looking at this, and then Rerun came and all these other things. And I had in my life very good people that love me dearly, and they only wanted success. Was how could we get this bigger? Let's go beyond the Jewish world. Let's go get bigger. Let's get more people, not for the sake of just being big, but for the sake of trying to be more Makarev. And I
Right.
realized something in this process, and this is very this is very now for us, as we're going even to the Shovavim and thinking about the last few parshas even that we went through, is that the promise that God gave was through Abraham, through Isaac. Even if Abraham had all the love in the world that he had for Yishmael, for his son Ishmael, God said the promises through Isaac. He says, I will bless Yishmael. Motherland Bounce was my Yishmael. I will say it. That whole Tekufa was my Yishmael. And I was trying to honestly start to make a great effort at trying to bring people back, but I realized I was losing myself in the process. And I've been here before. I
Right.
was losing
Right.
myself in the process. I wasn't no longer feeling like I was me. And one of the biggest things, if you're going out and you want to do a bigger reach out and you want to grab more people and all that, you can't do it at the sacrifice of yourself. You can't lose yourself doing it. And the more and more I'm going, and I said, I feel this, I sense this, I've been here before, I can't. That was really my breakdown. I feel like I can't. And the whole 2020, which was a crazy year for the world, by the way,
Everything, right?
put me in a place where I had corona. I had a lot of self reflection.
Oh
I
yeah,
ended up getting corona, and I was in the hospital for 6 days, and made me think about this a lot.
right,
And I was feeling like, you know what? I'm not 100. I'm a version of myself, but I'm not being 100% myself.
right.
And so I looked at it as that now looking back at it retrospectively, there's a lot of people that I brought in with Motherland Bounce. A lot of people came with Rerun that came from that outside world, that which it did its thing, but that wasn't my Isaac. That wasn't the path that I was making, and it just felt less comfortable for me. Like, I'm making the music right now, I feel like of my life. I'm using my voice more. I had always been afraid of using my voice. Even I wouldn't sing back in the day, because you got to be a rapper. It's not so whatever. If you want to be a musician, you got to be either this one or you got to be this one. And I'm breaking down all these
I
barriers, and
love
it's
that. Yeah, I've been hearing you sing more and more. Like this guy can
uh,
really sing. Like, where did that
yeah.
come from?
And then it's something that always been there, but I was always afraid of being that version of myself, because then I'm not now able to fit this box, and the boxes are gone. So the good part, at least I would say about all of that whole Motherland Bounce, the 2020 era of Nissim Black, right, is that I don't shove it in the garbage and say no what it was. They said I'm Ralph Cook, I think, also too. Even when he wrote something that he felt was like crazy, he never took it back. I never take it
Right.
back and whatever. This is a period that was in my life, and I learned very, very valuable lessons over there. Very, very valuable lessons over there. And I seen that it affected a lot of people that I would not have affected if I didn't go that route. But knowing myself that and even now, I didn't come back to say like I need to stick in the Jewish, because even that would have been not true to myself. I never said to myself that I want to be a part of the mainstream Jewish world. It just happens, but I can be my authentic self, and that generally starts to mesh, and you start to think about things. One thing that I thought about a lot was, sorry I'm talking so much,
No, no,
but
no,
it's
I
a
love
podcast.
it.
It's a podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
um was It's very interesting, is that who is your audience? Everybody was asking me that all the time, and I never thought about it, because I didn't. I just really didn't think about who my audience was, and it's hard to predict. I'm getting stopped by bubbies. I get stopped by kids who are not so from my reform kids come, and they all know my songs. And I have people who are not Jewish. I mean, if I could tell you what just happened to me in America just now, like how many people who are not Jewish at all coming up to me, right? So you never really know. But what's the common thread? Like, and I always thought about, like, if a person could sit down and you take one person that represents your whole entire audience, right? you you'd probably say that by that person you'd have a lot in common. You'd have a lot of the same goals and interests. You'd be able to have a very, in my personal experience, you'd be able to have a very deep conversation about God and the love of God, and family, and values. And so the more and more I started to reflect on that, like, if my audience was a person, what would they be like? I
Right.
need to make music for that person. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And from that came adored and changed and lifted, and it was like refreeing the shackles. And I'm spending a lot of time talking to God. A
Right.
lot of time. Oh, a lot
Yeah.
of time. A lot of time. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you just before we get to those songs. By the way, do we have another 10 minutes?
Yeah, we could do another 10 minutes for sure.
Okay, great. So like the last couple of months, obviously the black Jewish the tensions have really been brought up to the surface between Kanye, between Kyrie, and all of that. And I thought a lot about it. I thought a lot
Mhm.
about, like, yeah, obviously, we get defensive,
Mhm.
and as Jews, we like to call out anti-Semitism,
Mhm.
but I don't know my history that well. I don't know. I've heard that Jews and black people stood together during the civil rights
Civil
movements
rights.
and things like that.
Mhm.
But I don't see much of it today. At least I don't see much of it.
Right.
And again, it made me wonder whether we don't do enough in that realm. But I
Mhm.
wonder, from your place as you were watching this, and again knowing that you made your effort back in 2020, and maybe you moved away from that, but was anything tugging at your heart as the whole Kanye Kyrie, as that whole story was developing? Like, I, Nissim Black, I should have a voice in this.
Yes, yes and no. Not that I should have a voice in it. I mean, initially, I would say a Yetzirah comes in and says that, right? And it sounds like it's great. It sounds like all the right things, like, you're black, you're Jewish, you know this world, you should go out and you should be. And for me, because I have those moments of being able to sit with myself and say, it's not my thing. It's just not my thing. In order for me to be so outspoken about this topic, right? Not necessarily anti-Semitism, and I do it in my own way, but to do it in a way that the world is quote unquote expecting for you to talk about these things and to fight back and to whatever the case is, I'd have to invest so much of my precious time into researching and looking at, because and the reason why I don't know these things off the top of my head, because I don't spend time with them. I spend time. I'm in the Beit Midrash. I'm learning. I have 7 children. I'm on tour. I'm making music, and I really don't. And obviously, spending as much time as I can with Hashem. Like I just don't have a natural interest for these type of things, for these type of news, and to be in that type of spotlight is just not something that I feel that I'm very um adamant about. Like, I got to be the one to speak. Now, it's a very natural thing for people to feel that way because I'm also black. I come from that world. Kanye was my favorite rapper growing up, one of my favorites, and I was very outspoken about that. And certain things make sense, and I have spoken here and there. I've said what I have to say, but I don't feel like a lot of times that a lot of the places that want me to talk on those things really want to hear my perspective,
Right.
because mine's is very spiritual, and it's very, and to some people it may come off as very religious, and I don't feel like something that I see and I know and I believe 1,000% is a spiritual problem. I can't come up with non-spiritual solutions for them.
Hmm.
You understand what I mean? And bring
Absolutely.
myself down into
It's
combating
it's
and arguing.
really one of the things that I find also whenever these, anti-Semitic incidents come up and people are like, say something about it, say something about it. I'm like, there's nothing that I could say that is what you want me to say. So,
Right, right,
you want me to have one thing, and that's not what I'm thinking. That's not what's
right.
going through. I'm thinking about, like you said, I'm thinking about, Yitzchak and Yishmael and Yaakov and Esav, and
Right.
it's not what you want to hear.
Yeah, you don't want to hear about this, and you and truly, your soulmate want to hear it. You don't want to hear about this because you everybody wants to, like, have the best opinion or to prove the other person wrong and to have the best, and you see
Soundbite.
this going on. Best
Yeah.
soundbite. Everybody, exactly. Be Duke. Everybody wants the best soundbite, and they want that limelight. And controversy is just selling right now. Like, if you could be a controversial, polarizing individual, like, you got it made. You know what I'm saying? Yes, half of the people will hate you, but the other people love you so much. And for me, this is disingenuine. It's not genuine for me. If I'm going to throw my neck out there and I'm going to say things that are going to somehow, and for whatever reason, even if I'm sincere, but they're gonna target me with hate and different things, and I'm gonna have to encounter that. It's just the world we live in. Anything you say, you're gonna have people that hate you for it, right? But if I'm going to put my neck out for it, and this was my problem, even going back to Motherland Bounce and what I was feeling like, I want it to be something I'm wholeheartedly invested in and I believe in. If you want to have a problem with Nissim Black because I love Hashem, and Hashem is the most important thing in my world and in my life, and I don't feel that I should not talk about that, and I'll talk about it. I'll scream it from the mountaintops. Hate me for that? That one I'm okay, because you're hating me for something that I'm willing to give up my whole entire life for. I'll die for this. But for a few extra specials and people to know who I am because I spoke about Kanye West, I just really not that concerned about it. I think that's what he's doing. He wants to be on TV more, so he's talking more. So, but
Mhm.
for me, it would take too much of investment of who I am and my time, and I don't really have the time. As a Gedalia Finster, I heard one say, he says, "Why are you giving these things real estate in your
Yeah.
mind?" You know what I
I
mean?
love that
I
line,
just
right?
I can't. Now, unfortunately, the issues that we're having is that any violence or anything like that that's being spewed because of these hurtful comments and different things that he said, that's already altogether different purpose, and an investigation or something needs to be made. But I still don't know what it is that I can do. What I can do, I always said, there's a famous guy who, was very adamant about, asking people, particular white people. I seen him one time. He asked one of these white rappers, I forget what his name is. Post Malone. He asked him on the Breakfast Club, the Charlemagne the God. He asked him, he said, "What are you doing for Black Lives Matter?" And I've always said, I wish this guy would ask me that. Because you know what I tell him? I'm living a black life that matters. That's what
Ah, love it.
I'm living a black
Love it.
life that matters. So you could be busy arguing, going back and forth with people, or whatever, but I'm living a Jewish life. I'm living a Yiddish life that matters, that thrives. And the more and more good that I do, it's for sure going to snuff out anything that this guy has to say. So for me, that's been the approach that I've been taking with it. I'm not like not saying anything, but I'm definitely not running out to try to be like, I need to be the ambassador right
That
now.
makes sense. Let me ask you one last question, and then I'll let you go.
Hmm.
I heard you say on another podcast or presentation that a lot of the concepts for your music comes from your hispodidus, things that happen when you're having your private conversations
Hmm.
with God. So I just want to ask you a little bit about that process, about turning those feelings into music, and specifically, if people were to listen closely to your music, where you can, which lyrics or which tracks would they really hear like the depth of Nissim Black? Your vulnerability. Where would they hear it most?
I would definitely say, um, to start, I'll say with the tracks is, songs like Change, Lifted, A Million Years, Adored, obviously. Um, a lot of these songs, I mean, I think almost, mostly all the music is these days. I have a song called uh, Mercy. A lot of these things came from very much so deep down crying or praising God, King of the world, even. These are songs that come from, you spin. There's themes that happen when a person's accustoms themselves to talking to God. That they take the things that are going on in the season in their life. This is what generally happens. And I know for me it happens, but these become a part of those conversations with God. Either you're working on a particular thing, or you desire a certain thing, or a certain spiritual, item, or characteristic, or whatever, and you live with those things. As a breast lover, we have a accustomed to read from the book of Lekutei Maran and take one Torah that's for us, and to live with it. We
And
learn it
turn it
over and
into a
over again,
prayer,
and
right?
turn it into a prayer, and turn it into our whole time. And you live with it. So you have these seasons. And so what happens a lot of times, Adored, for instance, a lot of my theme was that to God, like, I'm not shy about saying to God, like, I want to be your favorite guy. I want to be the one that you're in love with the most. God, I want you all to myself. And I don't mind saying that to God, because I'm being with my heart. Not that I want anybody else to not be God's favorite, but I want to be. It
Yeah.
says that King David was a man that was after your own heart. And I spent a lot of time, especially on my journey, even still now, I'm still very busy with Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, and just to watch the relationships that God builds with the characters. And when it says after that person and Hashem was with him, like, what does that mean? And if they wrote a book on Nissim Black, would it say that Hashem was with him afterwards? And so for me, that was like a recurring theme in my heart and my mind. Is something I really wanted. So Adored came out of that. These were the lyrics that came onto that, because this is what I was doing at that time. That was at least the theme of what my personal prayers were. So these things always are coming out, and there's one theme or one form or another where these things are coming. Or I'll have a speech somewhere, and in the speech I said something that was like, wow, that's such a good thought, and it stays with me. So then it comes out in a song, and a whole song comes out of that. So that's another thing. I don't know if it ever come out or when it'll come out, whatever. I have a song I just recorded now that I'm first now naming it here, I guess, but it's called Speed Dial. But obviously I referenced it in one song, but the idea of just like, Hashem, you're on my speed dial. When something goes wrong, the first thing I do is I'm thinking
Speed
to
dial.
call you. I'm calling you. So I have a song called Speed Dial because it was in my, so these type of things
Well, now I'm excited
are
about it.
reflecting.
I would be the first one to listen. I'm going to be there every day waiting. Speed dial, when's it coming?
Thank you.
Listen,
Thank
that's
you.
really, really powerful. So give us a bracha. If you had to take the whole, like your main message boil it
Mm.
down to like, this is what you want your audiences to hear. This is what you want us, the listeners. Your music goes out to millions and millions of people. If you can
Yeah.
take that message and turn it into a bracha blessing that you could leave us off with.
I think my biggest blessing to all of you and all of us is that we should be able to be kept by the light of truth. You know, it's very hard to decipher. It's very hard in this generation because there's so much going on, and there's so much noise, and there's so many choices that it brings only more confusions. The more and more we leave from one, then already we have to decide. We have to start making decisions, and that's very hard. And the more numbers it is, it even becomes harder. So my biggest blessing is that we should be able to filter through everything that's going on in the world outside and in our own personal lives and our own inner world, and that we would be able to find that light of truth, the serenity of peace of being able to find out exactly what it is that I'm supposed to be doing with my life in this moment. I think it's
Amen.
very hard for us to be able to get to that, but we should be able to know our personal purpose in this world, and how we could be able to affect the world in a much bigger way.
Amen. Nissim, thank you so much. This was so beautiful, so powerful, so amazing. It was a real zechus, a real merit for me to have this conversation with you. I'm so excited for the listeners to hear it. And I want to give you a blessing that Hashem should continue to give you the most beautiful lyrics and the sounds to
Amen.
go out and inspire our nation, inspire the world, and
Amen.
to light up the planet in a time when there's so much darkness, and you really bring so much light. So thank you, and
Amen.
wishing you cult of all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kotov. Thank you.